Welcome, Courtnie Abercrombie.
That's right. Using AI, I can see who's clapping right now. No, I'm just kidding. Well, good. This is a little bit awkward, right? I especially love interacting with everyone. I'm kind of like Kirk usually. I like to talk with people in the halls. Um, but so this is helpful to get to see you. I'm seeing the backs of your heads right now, in case you're wondering. so so don't put anything on your computers that you don't want me to see. But on with it. So I'm going to try to make responsible AI as exciting and fun as possible. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of juicy stories here. So I'm kind of like Kirk. I'm not in the hallways, but I'm going to extend the invite at any time that you want to talk, separately after these presentations. You feel free to call me. I'm going to put up some contact information at the end. Um, so as part of my job, at the very end of what I was doing at IBM before I quit to actually come and do this, and quit with full blessing. There is no everything was great with IBM, and they were as ethical as anybody I have ever seen doing AI. But I observed a lot of clients in the consulting side of the business that I thought, wow, this is just really nonchalant how they're taking some of the ways that they're swapping out people's data and the practices that they're putting in place or not putting in place. And I thought, someone's got to take one for the team here and quit and show people what's really going on inside these higher level conversations. And so a lot of the conversations I was having with teams on the ground at these Fortune 500 companies were with their chief data officers and their executive officers. Even people really want to take advantage of machine learning capabilities and AI. And then separately, I'd have conversations with their data science teams, and I felt like, wow, there's a huge disconnect here about how things are getting done. And I kind of want to talk to you about some of those. But first, let me share my screen with you, and we're going to see how well this is, how technology treats us today. So let's see here. Are you seeing my screen? Okay, good. I can see it from the back. Thanks, Kirk. I appreciate the hands. All right. All right. So I saw this come across. It's a picture of Emma Watson, and it's one of these meme type things. I have a 13-year-old. She's always into memes. And I kind of snarkily, I'm kind of snarky like this. I thought, okay, well, you don't want other people to decide what you are. You want to decide for yourself. All right, me too. Me too. I don't want to either. So, but then I thought, you know what? No, it's going to be algorithms who are going to perpetuate way beyond what any humans are going to be able to perpetuate. They're going to perpetuate decisions about you on a much grander scale and in every single solitary system on the planet of the earth because of the way that people are swapping and bartering data back and forth. So while we're imagining this better universe, basically, with machine learning and artificial intelligence and augmented reality, we are in the business of labeling people. Let's just face it. At the end of the day, it's all about the data and what we do and how we label it. And then we kind of swap it back and forth, and we add value by adding more information to the data. But the problem is that it's becoming kind of dangerous because we're personalizing people into corners. We are literally making it where they can't change themselves or see a different worldview, even if they wanted to, all while encouraging them to become more dependent on our work. So, we have to think about these things. We've determined patterns on people based on imperfect data. We've given them no transparency, no process for appealing that data or their label that we've given them. And we may not even be updating that information on a regular basis, but nonetheless, we continue with selling and swapping and bartering that data with business partners and others who may also be mindlessly doing the same things. And it's not that we have really bad intent, but we've got a minimal viable product to get out, people. So let's hurry it up. I don't need to think about this data right now. We'll scale it later. We'll have good data practices later. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, and then later never comes. So let's talk about some of the stakes here that we are actually putting onto people. And that is our next slide. So at the top right, I used to have this bigger because I talk to corporate folks a lot. As a matter of fact, I was just at Microsoft's headquarters, and I shared with them this exact same presentation because I want you to be able to see what I shared with them and what they're thinking about as well. So one of the things I used to do is I'd have the left side of the screen much bigger because it's the corporate parts of what can happen. These are the stakes: brand reputation, when AI goes awry, trust, clients, risk. But I kind of thought, you know what? This is all based on what happens to people, though. And we are literally talking about life and death as we're putting out autonomous cars, autonomous weapons, health diagnostic tools, surgery assisting robots. We're talking life or death, people. We got to get this right. No more MVP only mentalities. We can't just throw it out there and see what sticks. We got to have the data right. So, we're talking rights and liberties of people, even as we look at even jailing systems and whether or not someone should be allowed to be probated or not. I mean, this is people's lives and livelihood at stake here. It's no longer just, oh, I'm going to create a product and someone's going to give me feedback. So since we're creating all these firsts, how do we want to be remembered in history? We're creating a whole lot of firsts, and I feel like we're really not thinking this through all the way. But I want to give you some stories so that when you're asked to do things that you may have the best of intentions when you start them, you'll actually think about them and whether or not these are projects that are worthy to take on. Because guess what? It's okay to say no. It's absolutely okay to say, I'm not going to do that project. And at the very least, yes, they may find someone else, but at least your part in history will go down the way you want it. So let's talk about some of these good intentions and some of the things that have happened before. This guy, Mark Oliphant, this is an old-timey story, good old-fashioned scientist, right? His curiosity was just curiosity about the structure of the atom, and it became the hydrogen bomb 10 years later when someone used his work. Let's talk about this guy. Does anybody know who this guy is? Just raise your hands because I can see the room, but I can't hear you. Nope, I see no hands up. This is Andrew Pohl. And the reason I have such a crappy picture of him here is because he kind of kept a low profile after what happened to him. He got out of school. He was so excited about what he could do with data science. And he was kind of ready to take on any challenge at Target. So much so that when he figured out that he could identify right down to the second trimester how pregnant someone was when they after purchasing some products at the store, he bragged about it to a New York Times reporter who basically put it in a story entitled "How Corporations Know Your Secrets." And then Target became kind of this single-handedly created this creepy paranoia that we now know today that people have about data and what can people see on me, and so this all just started because two marketing folks came and said, hey, if we didn't want people to know that we knew they were pregnant, do you think you could still find that out just by looking through their history? And then it became this whole like almost career wrecking type of thing for him, and for Target, it became kind of an embarrassing brand reputation moment that, they were collecting all this information without people knowing. That was before people decided that data collection was just going to happen regardless of what they think. This guy, does anybody in the room know who this guy is? Kirk, not even you. I don't see your hand up. This is Aleksandr Kogane. Does anybody know about the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal? Okay, now there we go. Thank you. I appreciate the hands. So this guy is behind that. He is the data scientist. And what's funny about him is talking about best of intentions. So he actually started his research on well-being and kindness. So when we think about that, he was looking at, like all of us, right, at different parts when we're trying to prove how great our idea for a machine learning application is. We think, oh, we got to get the data for that. How are we going to get the data for that? Well, this guy, it was how he got the data that really is in my mind the worst some of the worst parts of this story, but he decided he couldn't scale research, his survey research, because he didn't have enough money. So he put out a Facebook app basically that collected people's information. I am assuming it was something like a game that it probably told people what profile they were most like or something like this in terms of their psychology. And he billed it though as a research app used by psychologists. Now that sounds inane when you look at it. It sounds non-threatening, but it is estimated that ultimately, after he gave this information to Cambridge Analytica, that 87 million people were ultimately affected by this app, and that allegedly Cambridge Analytica was able to sway the 2016 election. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics on that, but I mean, the point is we have a lot broader impact than we can even foresee. And we really need to be much more thoughtful about AI and machine learning applications that can start to build in at scale all kinds of treacherous problems, including, I can just envision those Cambridge Analytica data brokers going, okay, who wants profiles that are easy to influence? I mean, come on, this is crazy to me, to think how this data was swapped and bartered. So if we look at this next thing, I'm going to tell you my own story because it sounds like I'm being judgy on these people. But the truth is I came to my own moment where I said, you know what, I don't think I can participate in this particular project. And it really drew to me that there are a lot of data scientists, a lot of kids, I say kids, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. A lot of students that are coming out of school who don't know they're about to be put into the situation of their lives, career defining situations, and not always career defining in the way that we wish that they were. Sometimes we're talking career defining because it's going to determine how they go down in history. And I decided that, you know what, I'm not the only one who had this problem. So these were some of the questions when I encountered a situation where first it was presented to me, hey, you can be part of a team that could potentially reduce cancer in the world. And I thought, okay, wow, tell me more about that. And I don't have to have a medical degree. Whoa, this should have been my first clue, right? But in order to do that, of course, there's always this catch. We need to target every heavy smoker. And we need to do that we need to do that. And then we need to get them onto a product that is still really addictive, but it has a lot less carcinogenic stuff in it. And it's kind of like, okay, I really don't know. A lot of people, including myself, were kind of like, I don't really know how I feel about this. And then you start thinking about the client, and the client is a big tobacco group, and you're thinking, but it's these questions that you get smacked with all of a sudden when you find yourself in the room with a group of their executives, your executives at the highest levels, and then you're talking there with you got your data science teams and their data science teams, and they're trying to figure out what's the art of the possible and also what's the tolerance possible. And it just becomes one of these situations where I wish I could tell everybody in advance, think about these things that I've listed here. What is the upside of this solution that I'm about to partake in? Is this a solution that, even if we have to do a few semi-questionable things, is this something where it's going to outweigh the benefit is going to be so great that it would outweigh that? Is it even up to me to decide that kind of thing? Should I be thinking like that? What are the stakes here? If I did go out and let's say I classify, you can apply this to any questionable situation, by the way. It doesn't have to be just the one that I'm mentioning. But let's say, what if I did go ahead and classify heavy smokers? would this lead then to their harm ultimately? Would this list, because of all the ways that we barter and trade information in the cloud and put it all out there for everybody to see, and we give things to universities so they can share it out too, and before we know it, it's outside of our control. Would the heavy smokers then be also used by insurance companies to deny them access? And they're the very people who need access, because of their rates of emphysema and so forth. So did I just harm the very people that I might have been trying to help with this solution? And then more interestingly, as the conversations unfolded, the client actually started to change their mind about the intended use of the algorithm even. So there was a team that was already kind of working on some of these things. And then the client says, well, if we're able to identify every heavy smoker in the world, well, could we just, what about doing, targeting some younger people? And then, you're kind of like, oh, it's one thing to target people who are already, maybe smoking and have some of the health consequences, and you're trying to maybe scale that back. But to start a whole new thing, oh boy, So you have to think through these things, and what then the minute that starts happening and you realize this conversation's going south, then sadly you're digging through the contractual terms. Now it's too late. You didn't think about it. You should have thought about it in advance. But by the time you're digging through the legal language, by the time you're digging through the contractual terms, it's too late. So then the question starts becoming, well, who owns this? If I want to revoke this right now, whatever I've already developed, I see this person is headed south and their intention for this solution. I don't want to do that. Can I take out my algorithm? But guess what? Algorithms and data are inseparable. And if you look it up under patents and you talk to your legal teams, you'll find that out real quick. So the minute you start merging your information with any proprietary information from clients or anybody you're doing anything with, business partners of any kind, you're in it with them. There's not a whole lot of legal recourse unless you set it up well in advance. And so I'm warning you now, set yourself up well in advance so that you can be as ethical as you need to be. There are things you can do to try to curb things once you do realize they're out of your control. You can see if you can try to withdraw from the market. You can see if you can change the implementation plans. You can try to limit the API feeds that are going into this. You can find other ways to go about trying to limit the damage. But just remember, once you've created a hydrogen bomb, it's out there. And there ain't nothing you can do to take back the knowledge of that and how to do it. So I'd say just be very, very careful about what you take on and how you create and what you create. And just, don't create anything you wouldn't want your grandma or your mama to know about. And just, the other thing I'd say here too is create continual feedbacks with your team, with the client. Always be in touch as much as humanly possible. Always be in touch. So you know where their head is, what their ambitions are, and then who the affected people would be and how those people might, be impacted by the solution. So let's see here. Okay. Just to kind of introduce you to the bias harms, if you haven't seen this work from Kate Crawford and the team at AI Now Institute, they've got really great information on the different types of bias, such as allocation bias, where you're actually denying people resources, or you could even be redlining them in some cases. I've seen a lot of data scientists use proxies for responsibility. And they do that with things like FICO score, which creates another redlining situation. And if you ask data scientists who are fresh out of school, do you know what redlining is? Who wants to guess that they don't know? Half of them say, I don't know, I've never even heard of that. Who in the audience, just by show of hands, because I can see you guys, who knows what redlining is? Oh, thank you. so I mean, this is a situation that constantly comes up when people start trying to use FICO score, overly so, as a proxy for being responsible in their AI and machine learning capabilities. And then there's things that are equally important but not easy to measure, which is representational bias. And these are things that, this is who I am, my culture, my race, my gender, who I am socioeconomically speaking, and religiously and politically. These are things that are just as damaging. And you can see some of the examples. I don't even want to go through them because they're awful. But they're unintended for the most part, or some people just decide they're going to game the system and try to create situations, and they call it Google bombing, where they try to create situations, as you can see this one over here about the Jewish folks. But I'm not going to talk to them because they make me very uncomfortable. So anyway, let's move on. So these are the 5 things I gave to Microsoft as things to think about as they're developing their products. And I would say for any person any students, they should know these things too, not just the largest corporations on the planet, but as they're coming out of school, I want them to start framing their products, their solutions, the things that they want to do by impact. Think about, not all algorithms impact people's lives the same way. And so some of them you'll be tempted to experiment because, MVPs, that's what we do. We experiment. But in this case, we're talking about experimenting with people's lives. So I'd like to see a formal assessment of high to very high. It can be rudimentary. It doesn't need to be anything fantastic, and complicated. It can just be as much as, hey, this is a red level day, like an ozone action day. This is a red level application. We need to set more formal processes to fully vet this with internal and external review boards and people who are affected, who would potentially be affected. And we need to go through we owe it to ourselves to really strongly evaluate false negatives and false positives against the goal. So going back to that first question I had on the last slide, where I said, is the solution worth more than the cost of what it will take to implement the solution? Because if at the end of the day, if it was the heavy smokers you were trying to help and then you hurt them with this, then what did you actually accomplish? And then, vet the outcomes and tweak and then repeat is what I would say. Because, we are talking about huge life and death moments, self-driving cars, autonomous weapons, health diagnostic, assisted surgery, robotics, medium levels of things like denial of jobs, denial of loans. In some cases, denial of loans means I can't even try to get any sort of education or get married for some people. It depends what you're trying to do, but there's different impact levels, and certainly the highest level demands the highest level formal process reviews. And nobody wants to hear that, I know, but we really need to start thinking like that. The other thing I would say in my ventures, and so what I did with IBM was I was going across looking for repeatable AI solutions that we were doing over and over with customers in our services area. And so everything was custom in the beginning. And so they wanted to know, well, what could we do over and over? And so I saw the things we could do over and over, but I also saw that mistakes that we made over and over. And one of the biggest mistakes I would say was that we always had some sort of ROI, or we had some sort of a monetary value that we were looking. We wanted to save money or we wanted to make money. Those are the 2 levers, right? But what that brings about is, and especially when I think about the teacher ratings that some groups developed, if you think about teacher rating systems, these were developed, honestly, they were trying to weed out people. They were trying to cost save, not necessarily find the best teachers for the students. But you can do both. You can look at this, and yes, of course, you're always going to have an ROI. You're always going to have a monetary measurement. But what you need to try to fight for is, well, okay, fine, I've got my monetary thing that I have to achieve, but what if out of those ones I've got to cut, I make them the absolute best teachers on the planet? And sometimes that's inconvenient. You have to find data that you don't even know if it exists. Sometimes it's you're going to have to scan in a lot of contextual written text that people have filled out, assessment cards on teachers or whomever it may be. And maybe they're not always digitally ready for you, but take the hard road, do the right thing. You're going to love yourself a lot more and be able to sleep at night. If you can, just show up and try to fight for people outcomes. The other thing I'd say that people didn't do enough of is assign someone on every team to be responsible for representing the people who will be affected by the algorithm. One thing we don't traditionally do in product design, I don't know how many of you are familiar with design thinking in the room. Can you just hold up your hand so I can see? So design thinking is you go through a workshop usually and you try to get to the point of, and you put up your customer, and then you try to say, oh, this is an empathy map of the customer, the 5 things that matter to them that will make their life easier. End. I got the end card. So I want to hurry up. But instead, I would propose think also, in addition, think about the people who you will affect with the application. With the machine learning capabilities, because now it's the affected people who are going to determine whether or not the company gets a good brand reputation. Like think about the Target scenario with the pregnant women. The affected would be the women who were targeted by Target, but the customer would have been the people who work at Target, right? In this case, we should have brought the affected to bear instead of the customer as well, because it was them who affected the brand reputation. And then find unconventionally diverse ways to bring in diverse views. You don't always have to have just an external panel of people. You can actually bring diversity in all kinds of ways, and also be unconventionally diverse. Diversity is not just female, male, color of certain types. There's cultures, there's socioeconomic backgrounds, there's all of the things that the EEOC protects, plus our views on life, our political views and our ages and all of those good things. So bring as much of that into your circle of input as you're developing a product and a solution once you're out in the world doing these things. And then let's see, I'm going to try to skip around real quick. I think Kirk and several others have talked about dealing fairly with people's data. So I'm not going to hit this one too hard, but it's absolutely the truth. There's 3 places where things go wrong with algorithms and AI. And that's the data, and that's 90% of what goes wrong in ethics when it comes to artificial intelligence projects. And then algorithms and how exactly those get set up can also, like Kirk was talking about, overfitting, underfitting, but you could still say that's probably still having to do a lot with data. And then the training of those algorithms and how it gets done and who's overseeing it, even on the client side, who the experts are. I can't tell you how many times I walked into a client and they put their junior level most person and they say, yeah, we're trying to create the perfect financial advisor in our firm. I say, okay, give me your best financial advisors for, give me 5 of them for like 3 months. We're going to train this application. And they're like, oh no, but here's Bonnie. She just got out of school. She's going to be your expert. I'm like, well, you're paying all this money for a solution that's supposed to be like these 5 experts. And yet you're having your junior level person. So even that is incredibly important. So I would say that. And then the last thing on this data point is don't sell people's data to business partners without their knowledge and consent, and figure out ways to do that creatively, because there are plenty of ways that you can do that without perpetuating unfair classifications of them and preventing their opportunity with other businesses. And all of this build in choice and transparency, which I'm hoping you guys are leaving the slides for everybody, right? I hope so. If not, I'll post this to my website, aitruth.org, and you can get access to this. But definitely, you can go through things like, would you like to take a quiz to better help us tailor your selections? And then people can interact with their own profile and their own data. And, like for example, on Medium, I've been stuck with all these different articles. I was researching one area for a really long time, and I kept finding great articles on Medium. But now I'm kind of stuck with this profile of me that I'm like, I don't even want these articles anymore, but I can't seem to reset the darn thing. So we have to give people a chance to reset themselves in our AI. And I propose doing that with things like as much as thumbs up, thumbs down for every recommendation that your AI may make to the person, for every classification of the person that you make of them, for every hire that you give, thumbs up and thumbs down. Did that work? Did it not? We don't have enough feedback loops. And that is part of our problem. We have no feedback loops. And just give as much transparency as possible, and an appellate process. Give an 800 number in a website form or an online forum or something, some way to get feedback back into your algorithms and your machine learning capabilities. Because we tend to be like one and done. Here you go. This is you. You are now this person, and you will never be able to be changed because we've already propagated it into every ERP system on the planet because we gave it to a data broker, and that data broker gave it to this person. So good luck changing your score. Even FICO score has an appellate process, although people hate it. But and then finally, I'd say out of all of this stuff, if you find yourself in trouble, just start working with managers, legal people, compliance people, data officers, privacy offices, CISOs. They're all very invested in trying to make sure that things go very well. A lot of data scientists won't speak up because they're fresh in their jobs. They just got out of school, and they just won't say anything because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to lose their opportunities or be blacklisted. And if you don't think blacklisting is real, I have absolutely seen it on the client side. And they absolutely, when you raise your voice, it can be a thing. So I'd say then it's time to go outside of your stream of managers and talk to different people about things. Don't just, and you can do so usually anonymously through the compliance folks. They usually have hotlines and other ways that you can be anonymous and give tips on things that you're seeing to raise flags. But the most important thing would be just to not have those situations crop up where they're out of people's control. Where in the manager and director situations, they can see both up and down the organization. So they can see what's happening up here, and we can see what's happening down here. And that makes them uniquely qualified to catch these issues and fix them before they become a brand reputation scandal, before they hit the return on investment. And before people leave, some of your great data science talent leaves from good old frustration. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the most excellent data scientists in the world walk out of the company because they were just frustrated, period. And they didn't know that if they could talk up. So I would say make this, if you are a manager or director in the room right now, foster a culture of speaking up and make it part of a status so that it's expected instead of rare to bring up issues. And that's it. Okay, I went way over my time, but hopefully you guys found it to be informative and helpful.
Thank you. We have time for one question, one burning question for Ms. Abercrombie. And if you look at the camera, she can see you.
Hi, this is
Good.
Linesh.
Thank you for standing in front of the camera.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. Appreciate it. A question for you. Actually, the very first slide, when you opened up the presentation, it resonated with me. And the situation I am, based on the fact that I'm part of the corporate world. You mentioned about the powers to be and how they are completely out of, what they mention, sometimes they're out of sync with what is actual reality on the floor, right?
Yes.
They promise everything that they want to do based on data analytics, want to make their organization data-driven, but what comes to the floor is something different, and the challenges are so different. What strategy or strategies have really helped you in the past to get these people be in sync?
No. Yeah, you're talking about solving world hunger now. But
what has helped you ever?
If you have, there's no magic bullet, but really you just have to be, and it is almost a skill. You really owe it to yourself as a data, educated person to, I say that because our executives, they are not data educated people many times. And I don't want to, not always, but a lot of times. And I think you owe it to yourself to develop the skill set, not just data skills. Soft skills are so important, and intuition. You have to have great intuition to understand. Who is it that said the line about I've said some words and you've said some words, but I don't think we communicated. They were brilliant, because that's exactly what happens, I think, a lot of times between data folks and executives. But this constant communication, constantly keeping in touch, constantly double checking. Every single, we set up what sprints. Everybody does the agile methods, right? I think in the room, or you're familiar with them, where you're constantly checking in. Constantly check in, and don't just let them get away with sitting there checking their email. Ask them questions. Make sure that you're understanding to the nth level everything that they're trying to get out of whatever this application is that you're developing. And more so, I'd say, if you want to be truly ethical and responsible, try to figure out where their head is and where their ambitions and motivations are. If they really are trying to use the information because they see themselves as the next big superhero of whatever cause at the company, and they're strictly only thinking about the ROI, and they're strictly only thinking about the profit, try to understand all of these. Keep in touch with them on social media. Watch what they post. See what's important to them. Be intuitive, and try to get one step ahead of that, and make sure that, hey, have you thought about this, how that's going to affect people? Because affecting people is just as important these days to your brand reputation and your trust. Because let's just face it, a lot of times it's marketing people. I come from the marketing world, so I speak for all of us, of course. I'm teasing, but that's, it's them who are trying to push the envelope the most, right? So you just have to, I hate to say it, but you have to develop a skill of being very, a very soft skill, which is, you've got to understand how to influence people, and you got to understand and what's motivating and driving them, and you have to keep in touch with them and keep a good relationship going, so that they feel like they can speed dial you at any second to ask you a question, and then you understand where their head is.
Thank
That's not an
you.
easy answer. Sorry, there's a bullet.
Thank you very much, Ms. Courtnie Abercrombie.